What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, we're talking wildcards. A lot of people have hit the button ahead of Game Week 5, so I put out a tweet yesterday asking for people to send in their drafts so I could go through them. Kind of things that I like, things that I don't like, things that you need to be thinking about, right? So it's not necessarily me saying you have to change to this, you have to change to my preference. It's just things to give you something to consider before you lock it in. Obviously, we've got a few days till the deadline anyway. Just before we jump into it, I did want to talk about fantasy football scout. If you haven't already signed up to be a member, it really will help you out with your FPL management over this season. There's a link in the description below. Now, there is a whole host of tools here. Personal favorites for me are the stats table, so you can create your own table, and the season ticker as well. But we also have the rate my team tool, right? So if we click on here on the left hand side, you can put your FPL ID in. So for anyone that's already obviously signed up and playing FPL, it will tell you here how to get that ID. So my ID is 2. So you click on that and it shows you your projected points over the next few weeks. So in total from Game Week 5 to 10, it's saying I should get about 327 points. And then if you're considering a transfer, you can put that into this and then see if the points total kind of goes up by quite a lot, right? So, for example, my Ben Rama to Saar move, which I talked about before, if I put that in here, it's only saying I get an increase of like point whatever that is, 0.17. So it might tell me that that transfer possibly isn't worth it. Now, I might just go for it anyway. But if you're unsure about a transfer, unsure about who to bench, or unsure about captaincy and stuff like that, this is a really handy tool because it'll give you all that information. And what I've done for this video is I've put every single draft that I'm going to go through into the Rate My Team tool to see who gets the biggest score coming out of it. And then maybe that will give you something to think about. But if you want to play around with this tool and all the other tools that are on the site, including members-only videos, members-only articles, click that link in the description below. So when I asked for the teams, I also said to send over any concerns. So for this one, right, it was that took my advice to go for Ronaldo. Fair enough for the next two. Then obviously you've got that swap to Lukaku. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And then really unsure about the goalkeepers. Now, in terms of Rate My Team score from Fantasy Football Scout, this was actually really high. If you think that my team was 327, to get an increase up to 344 is pretty decent. And obviously you've got some players on the bench, especially White and Livramento, that look to be fairly nailed. We know Ben White is. Livramento seems to be as well. There's even rumours I saw earlier that potentially he could get played further forward with Kyle Walker-Peters playing in behind. That would be pretty good. Now, the next three fixtures aren't great, but he is so cheap, you can just leave him on the bench. So I don't have any issues with that kind of move at all by having him. I think if I was wildcarding, I would definitely have Livramento, even if he went up a little bit in price, if he's potentially going to become more attacking. Now, I would say this is kind of the standard-ish wildcard template team. Most teams will look something like this, right? Which is why the score is probably so good, 344. I think most of the other teams in this video aren't quite so high. So one of the concerns is about goalkeepers. Now, one of the things you can do on Fantasy Football Scout, by the way, is use the season ticker to see which goalkeepers rotate quite well. Right now, I think people who are wildcard and are in that kind of dilemma where you almost want to make a lot of changes to make use of the fact that you're wildcarding, and Sanchez almost feels like a bit boring, but I don't think anyone else has really stood out yet as this really good goalkeeper. So Guaita, for example, at Crystal Palace, well, Crystal Palace have played quite well. Are they going to be able to keep that up for the next kind of 5, 10, 15 games? We just don't know yet. It's way too early to say either way. They could regress to how they played last year. Yes, there's a lot of new signings and it looks positive how things are now. Like, I'm not expecting them to necessarily be in a relegation fight or anything like that, but we don't know exactly how they're going to play. So potentially having Guaita on your bench, so later on, if one of those two becomes the go-to goalkeeper, you could make that switch from your bench, I mean, obviously, because you start with both. The only issue is you take an extra 0.5 million to do that, and could that be better spent elsewhere? Even if not right now, at some point you'll probably want to spend that 0.5 million. So I'm very pro having just one goalkeeper, but I don't think there's anything massively wrong with having two. It just locks that 0.5 away. That's the only issue. I definitely like the thought process in terms of having a Chelsea defender in there now instead of going for Luke Shaw. I still think Luke Shaw is probably fine for the next 2 to 3 game weeks, but it does save you a transfer down the line. I don't really see any reason why Chelsea couldn't possibly shut out Spurs. Man City is going to be a little bit trickier, but then we know the fixtures get really good. I think on Reece James versus Rudiger's probably more nailed, but I don't really see how many... I can't see a situation where Reece James is probably going to miss a lot of games in the Premier League. There will probably be the odd one where someone else plays centre-back, Azpilicueta moves to right wing-back, maybe Hudson-Odoi plays or something like that. But it seems to be Reece James's place right now. And the fact that Alonso has started again in the Champions League, it does make me wonder when and how many games Chilwell is going to get over the next 5 to 10. So I just don't think he's an option. I definitely would have triple Liverpool. Salah, Trent and Jota makes absolute sense. You keep Jota until he becomes an issue and then you just move him on, possibly for Mason Mount down the line, possibly for Ferran Torres as well. And I think you've got kind of the forward line of choice right now. Bamford, Ronaldo +1. A lot of people are going for Jimenez. Some are sticking with Antonio. We'll talk about him a little bit more later on. And I think Ben White's a perfectly good bench option as well. So I think this team is really solid, mostly because it's probably similar to the one that I would build. And yeah, I don't know how much money's left in the bank, but you could, for example, just really quickly, you could downgrade Guaita to a 4 million and upgrade Marçal to Semedo. That might not be an upgrade if Marçal keeps playing and keeps playing well, but I feel like with Semedo, you definitely get a nailed on player. So that's just one thing you could do, but ultimately looking really good. So this one, I got to be honest, I nearly didn't use it because it is not very well cropped at all, right? It's cut off like a little bit from the bench, and obviously it's cut off Sanchez's shirt as well, but we can see enough to discuss it, right? So I allowed it to go. One of the comments that was made about this team was, I'm planning on removing Ronaldo and Gallagher for De Bruyne and any 4.5 million striker after game week 8. I kind of like that thinking, to be honest, because right now, and this is how quickly things change in FPL, right? We're only, 4 weeks gone. We're going into game week 5. At the start of the season, it was no premium strikers. Now people are thinking about having 2. Everyone's kind of forgotten how good Kevin De Bruyne can be. And Man City's fixtures from game week 8 onwards are really good. So there's nothing to say that by that point, like if De Bruyne scores a couple of goals over the next few weeks, we know that he's pretty much nailed in that Man City side. I like the fact you've got a contingency plan, that you've got the 3 premiums now, Salah, Lukaku and Ronaldo, and you're already thinking ahead to Kevin De Bruyne. Because if you're making a wildcard now, you have to kind of, yes, you've got a plan for the immediate fixtures, but you've also got to have a plan a little bit longer term, because you can't just whack out another wildcard, right? So I like that thinking. Obviously, Gallagher on the bench, I assume maybe for fixture this week, because he's playing Liverpool. You could play him next week and bench one of like Ayling, Marçal and Ben White. I think Ayling's got a pretty tricky fixture in game week 6. So Gallagher can come in. I do... Again, you're going to go for De Bruyne later on. But if you're going for a 4.5 million striker, that means you're moving to a 4-4-2. So again, straight away, you're kind of seeing where the 3 premiums hinders you a little bit. Like having to have Gallagher and Gray. You've got no Torres, although arguably Torres isn't that big of a miss right now. He's got a good fixture this week, then 2 tough ones. So I think he could be a wait and see. But no Jota, no Greenwood, no Rafinha, no kind of that price point. So there's a lot relying on Gray and Gallagher keeping up the returns they've got so far. And I would just be a little bit sceptical about whether that's going to happen. And again, that is a choice you make by having the 3 premiums, but it also shows where it kind of holds you back a little bit. Because in this team, you haven't even got like a Shaw or a Rudiger or a Reece James or basically any way to get money into that defence as well. So it looks okay right now, and I'm sure it will perform well for a couple of weeks. But if things start to go wrong with the defence, or like I said, Gray and Gallagher, where is that money coming from? You could just stop the Kevin De Bruyne plan, of course, and start spread. Like if you sold Ronaldo, you could start spreading that money around, but that's going to take a lot of transfers to get to that point. Like if you downgrade him to someone like Calvert-Lewin or Antonio later on, or Bamford, whoever it is, then that's a lot of money saved, but then how quickly can you get it into those other spots? That's the only thing I would kind of think about with a team like this. Rate my team score much lower than the last one because of that, 327. But overall, not a bad team. I like the fact that you're thinking about De Bruyne, but I would just wonder if stuff starts going wrong with that midfield, and it might not. Gray and Gallagher might be the best value players we've ever had in FPL. What's the plan if that does happen, though? So another team with the 3 premiums, right? This is going to be popular going forward. So for people like me that have only maybe got Salah plus 1 premium forward, if those 3, Salah, Lukaku and Ronaldo, keep performing, that could hurt. So it's very clear to see what a lot of wildcarders are doing. The concerns for this team, from Brian, were a very weak bench, especially with Mount and James rotation concerns. I wouldn't be too worried about Mason Mount. I think he will start the majority of games. Let's say he was fit for all 38 games. I think he could play like maybe 34, 35. Maybe that's a bit ambitious, but he will start most games. Obviously, he came back from the international break, got a rest, played in the Champions League. I think he's going to start more often than not, so I wouldn't be massively concerned about him. Reece James, possibly. You've got Amabamidele on the bench and Livramento, so one of those could come on. I actually like the fact that we've got a 3.9 million defender now, because that just gets you a little bit more value out. If you wanted to be a little bit less risky, little bit less risky, I should say, and you want to stick for those two defenders, you could just change James to Rudiger, possibly on the wild card. I do think Rudiger is just that little bit safer. He's not as exciting, he's not as attacking, but in terms of picking up clean sheets, he's going to be there pretty much week in, week out. The main issue for me for this team is Gallagher, Decore and Gray. Again, I don't really mind one. You can maybe make an argument for two, but having all three, how are you going to upgrade? Where does the money come from? Again, if it's going to be Lukaku or Ronaldo, is it better just to get rid of one of them now and just sacrifice that kind of player and just realise that you can only captain one of them anyway? I know, obviously, that's my preference, right? You know that if you've watched my videos that 2 premiums I think is best. But Gallagher, Decore and Gray just feels like a little bit too much, especially when you've got to play pretty much all of them every single week. Like, if Everton start having a bad run of fixtures or a bad case of form, their form goes down, they're not playing as well, whatever it might be, then I feel like you are kind of stuck with them a little bit. Now, I know I said that kind of last week, and then people are like, well, if you've got Gray, you just move to Gallagher. If you've got Gallagher, you move to Gray, and that's fair. But what if you wanted to go up a little bit higher, like a Rafinha, a Jota, a Torres, or someone like that? Now, to be fair, most of those players are kind of issues with rotation, and you could take out Mason Mount if you wanted one of them anyway. But I just feel like you lose a bit of flexibility with these players. It depends how quickly you want to move the money around. Like, again, if you downgraded Ronaldo to like an Antonio later on, you'd have like 4.5 to spend. You could just upgrade one of those 5.5 mids straight up to like an 8 or a 9 and just be done with it. So I just feel like this team's a little bit chasing the points that have already come. I just Decore and Gray, they're probably going to be okay, but I don't know if I'd want both of them and Gallagher as well. It feels a bit risky. I don't mind the Diaz pick. I think going for Man City, Chelsea defenders is always good. The 2 best defences in the league. And we know from game week 8 onwards, Man City have got a pretty good fixture run. And to be honest, like, they could definitely get a clean sheet this week anyway against Southampton. Then it's Chelsea away, Liverpool away. Now, both those games are tricky. They will be the 2 trickiest games they'll probably play all season. You could maybe add Man United away into that as well. But could I see him coming away with 1 clean sheet from those 2 games? I mean, it's definitely possible given how good Man City are. So again, I like the idea behind that thinking. You can literally just play Trent, James and Diaz every single week. You don't even have to worry about the other 2 defenders. So it's not that your worry is the defense and the bench. My worry is more the midfield. And I'd probably look to find a way to at least upgrade 1 or 2 of those 5.5s. So this one is Chaz. Big shout out to Chaz. He's one of the Patreons on the Let's Talk FPL Patreon. If you want to check it out, link in the description below. I didn't pick him because of that. I just thought it was a nice team to kind of talk about, and a good rate my team score as well, 337. So I think that's the second highest on this list. I don't really have too many concerns. I would question, right, the 352. Not because I think that Torres and Jota and Sarr are bad picks, because they're not really. And moving that money into the forward line is not necessarily an issue. You could do it in 2 moves. But I just think, like, I don't know. A few of us started on 352 early on. And then I kind of moved quickly to 3-4-3 because I recognise like Calvert-Lewin, Antonio, Bamford, etc. all doing really well. Obviously, Jimenez is in this team as well. By the way, if Bamford's fit, right, and we're all speculating about an injury based on 1 comment, really, and then maybe 1 video of him holding his hamstring. It could have just been cramp or anything. Like, if he is fit, I do think that Bamford is a better option than Jimenez. I'm just going to put that out there because a lot of teams have only got Jimenez now. There's nothing wrong with that. I just think if the 2 are both fit, Bamford is the one for me. I know a lot of people are like worried about Leeds, but I just think it's too early to be saying like second season syndrome and stuff like that. But yeah, on the 3-5-2, we kind of recently went to a 3-4-3. Loads of options. And nothing is massive. Unless Bamford's out, nothing's massively changed. Okay, Calvert-Lewin's not an option right now. And I guess Callum Wilson as well, although most people weren't talking about him much recently anyway. Antonio's only missing 1 game. So I don't think that the mid-price forwards dream is dead or anything like that just yet. So just consider that. Obviously, with Jota and Torres, you've got 2 players. I don't know, am I even allowed to say that they're minutes concerns? I mean, Torres has started the last 3 games up front. Obviously, when De Bruyne is back, when Foden's back, there could be a reshuffle. I completely agree with everyone that says that Foden's not an issue for the number 9 position, of course, but there could be like a mix around. Foden could go to the left, Grealish could come in as an 8 again, which he's played already for Man City, and then De Bruyne could play up front. Torres could move to the right, out of the team. Foden might not ever get back into that team, at least for a long time. So it's hard to know, but if he's going to stay in that number 9 position, I do like him, so I don't hate the Sarr, Jota, Torres moves at all. I would have Jota in my wildcard team. I just wonder if we're maybe like forgetting about the mid-post forwards just a little bit with this team. In defence, again, really good. Trent, Rudiger, Shaw, kind of standard players. No, I don't think there's anything wrong with keeping hold of Shaw. Maybe you didn't have him before, but having Shaw in the team and also looking ahead to that Chelsea fixture swing. Because when it does happen, you could then move Shaw to either Reece James or Christensen if he's still playing, someone like that. I do worry a little bit about Christensen in our wildcard teams because I do think there's going to be some rotation. I don't know how much, but there's going to be some. But you've got that player then with Shaw that you could move to another Chelsea defender. Maybe Chilwell's an option, maybe Alonso's an option by that point. But you've got both of them there. So you're already nicely set up for that. And so apart from that, the only other thing I guess is Semedo is quite expensive considering you can only play... It's not that you can only play 3 of these, but with this team, to me, it just screams 3-5-2. So you're going to have to bench one of Semedo, Shaw, Trent and Rudiger every single week. And that just doesn't seem ideal. It seems like quite a lot of money to put on your bench. Nothing wrong with having a solid bench to call upon. I just wonder if Semedo at 4.9 is just a little bit too expensive. Maybe you're doing it to cover Torres or to cover Jota later on if they become minutes issues. Maybe it's just to have a stronger team. But that is something I would consider. I get why he's in there because he's looked very good. He's been very advanced. But week to week, if you've got a choice between Shaw, Trent and Rudiger, benching one of them or playing Semedo, I think it's difficult. And if you're going to play Semedo, that's absolutely fine. But then you've got a lot of money on the bench in Rudiger or Shaw. So maybe it's worth just getting rid of one of them and putting that money somewhere else. Maybe it's Jimenez to Bamford. Maybe it's switching Torres to a 3-4-3 formation. Maybe even not right now, but having that plan in place for later on, just for when Calvert-Lewin's back, when Antonio's back for his suspension, etc. So you might have already thought of that. Just something to consider. Otherwise, I really like it. I don't think that Steele is the second choice goalkeeper for Brighton. I think it's Sherpen, and I think he's back fit now. So that's just something to consider because you might want to go for a different 4.0 million. I know this is a minor thing, but you might want to go for another 4 million keeper in case at some point you happen to want triple Brighton. I know that sounds crazy, but who knows? If you switch to 3-4-3, maybe you go Basuma, maybe you bring a defender back at some point. Maybe you go for Duffy instead of one of those more expensive players. I don't know, but it's just something to consider. So I don't think Steele is second choice. I could be wrong on that. Brighton fans, let me know. But otherwise, I really like the team. Good rate my team score. Solid overall. So there we go. Big shout out to Fantasy Football Scout for continuing to partner with the channel. Really happy to have that partnership going. Link in the description below if you want to sign up and become a member. Loads and loads and loads and loads of useful tools. And obviously use the Rate My Team tool for this video. But there's a ton of other ones to use across this FPL season as well. So I really would recommend it. Link in the description below. If you enjoyed that video, do give it a like and hit that subscribe button if you are new around here. And I'll be back later on today. So you don't even have to wait till tomorrow for another video. Later on today, I'll have the Game Week preview out as well. Thank you for watching. Let me know below how your wildcards are going, and I'll catch you again later.